is Katie, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about intellectual disabilities and kind of some of the characteristics of intellectual disabilities, and also how we can help in the classroom um, help these students. So let's get started. First, I wanted to go over how to recognize an intellectual disability. Um, so some of the key characteristic traits that I have here are that the person often has certain limitations in four things. So the first one is mental functioning, next skills, such as communicating. The next one would be taking care of him or herself. We'll go over this a little bit later, but that's called adaptive, and also social skills. So all of these things combined often lead to later and slower development and learning in a typical child who has an intellectual disability. Um, Going off of that, off of this website, parentcenterhub.org, they had some really great other characteristics. And some of these you'll see are for children who are younger, such as they may sit up, crawl, or walk later than others, or learn to talk later. And some of these you might see in older people who have intellectual disabilities, like they find it hard to remember things, they may not understand how to pay for things, have trouble understanding social rules, may not see the consequence of their actions, have trouble solving problems, or thinking logically. And like I said, those could be for any age. Going along with that, a person who has an intellectual disability is characterized by the ability of that person's brain to learn, think, solve problems, and make sense of the world. And this is known as an IQ. So studies have found that most or average people have an IQ of about 100. And if a person has an IQ less than 70 to 75, they're identified and probably have an intellectual disability. So not only is it IQ though, it's also characterized by whether a person has the skills that he or she needs to live independently. And like I mentioned earlier, this is called adaptive behavior. So both of these things characterize an intellectual disability. What we're going to do now is watch a video about intellectual disabilities and kind of goes more into depth of what we just talked about, how you might recognize a student in your class who has an intellectual disability. As we watch this video, you may think of someone you know who has an intellectual disability or other traits you have seen maybe before in your life. So here we go.
This module provides a brief summary of what an intellectual disability is. An intellectual disability is a disability characterized by significant limitations in both intellectual functioning and in adaptive behavior, which covers many everyday social and practical skills. This disability originates before the age of 18. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that approximately 3% or 6.5 million of civilian, non-institutionalized adults had ID in 2010. Intellectual functioning, also called intelligence, refers to general mental capacity, such as learning, reasoning, problem-solving, and so on. It coexists with strengths. One way to measure intellectual functioning is an IQ test. Generally, an IQ test score of around 70 or as high as 75 indicates a limitation in intellectual functioning. Adaptive behavior is the collection of conceptual, social, and practical skills that are learned and performed by people in their everyday lives. Conceptual skills include language and literacy, money, time, and number concepts, and self-direction. Social skills include interpersonal skills, social responsibility, self-esteem, gullibility, naivete, social problem-solving, and the ability to follow rules and obey laws, and to avoid being victimized. Practical skills include activities of daily living or personal care, occupational skills, healthcare, travel and transportation, schedules and routines, safety, use of money, use of the telephone. Standardized tests can also determine limitations in adaptive behavior. People with intellectual disabilities are your neighbors, coworkers, or fellow students, friends, and family members. Changes in policy over the last decades has meant that the overwhelming majority of people with intellectual disabilities live in the community, on their own, with their families or friends. What is important to them is what is important to everyone, living a healthy and meaningful community life.
Okay, I love this video. I love the perspective they have on people with intellectual disabilities, and how they really are just people, right? Some of the takeaways I really got from this is, yes, they may take longer to learn or know how to take care of themselves, but they will learn if we can properly teach them. It will just take them longer. But I think as a teacher, as we learn to have patience and as we learn to know how to help these students, we can really help them succeed. Which leads me to the next section of this lesson, which is classroom strategies. Based on the website, again, that I mentioned earlier, there's some great ideas about what you could do as a teacher to help students who have an intellectual disability. So the first is to demonstrate instead of just giving directions. This will help them as maybe they're a little slower to learn, to visualize it. Another classroom strategy would be to break longer steps into smaller ones, as well as to give immediate feedback, so they're not confused if it takes a while, and as well as to teach them life skills and involve them. The first three kind of go with IQ characteristics, like we talked about, and this focuses more on adaptive. And lastly, to help and implement their IEP into the classroom. And as a teacher, you should have access to that. Okay, we're going to watch one more video. I really love the way that this video explains some teaching strategies to those with intellectual disabilities. And as you're watching, I invite you to maybe take notes or think which of these you would really like to implement in your classroom. Oops. Okay. Um, I love that saying at the end, everyone deserves to reach their full potential. And to close, I found for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, I love this poster. It says, "We work, we learn, we love." And I just know that as we help implement these strategies into our classroom and as we recognize the characteristics of people with um, intellectual disabilities, that we will truly be able to help them in their lives to function and be the person that they want to be. So I just invite you to implement those strategies we talked about. Thank you.